Hey guys, marathon in one day going through my whole website, which is basically all the things about my cartridge receipt from a Smith family album according to the eBay seller that owned it before me, and pictures he showed me from that album that were just people that said Smith, but you had no idea who they were. They just said Smith in Missouri, places that Smith had lived. These are things I've been studying since, well, I would say more May 2017. I found the photo technically in September 2016, and I'm just being raw and honest. Yeah, I'm a very spiritual person, because I think when I felt so impressed to study this is when Scannell Kid ended up in the documentary as a painting with a longer chin. They edited that was apparently an artistic, but I think they knew the chin didn't match. I just went through my last video. I'm going in order of my website. The chin matches so well between my photo and the death mask, but not with the Scannell Kid. He doesn't have that chin that protrudes. Just doesn't. So that's my huge knock. I mean, nothing wrong with people that like it. I mean, I see some of the things I see. I think the lips are too big. Anyway, but that's not what this video is about. Moving on. There's so many aspects of things to study. This is a marathon. I'm doing this all shorter videos in one day. It's probably going to be several hours. This is years of studying this and wanting to know. You know, I just wanted to know, is this real? Is this him? And then when I bought it, I'm like, well, let's research this. I could find out the clothing is not 1840s, but it is. It is. But Lucian Foster is what Joseph Smith III, I'm not going to pull this back up. Actually, I can. Let's go to page 29. William B. McCarl. I have a link to the Salt Lake Tribune. But it's curled, so you can't read this whole thing. But as you go through this, Lucian Foster is mentioned. I think by an artist by the name of Lucian Foster, who took the daguerreotype of his dad. And he's saying either way, it's before 1844 when his dad died. Okay, painting. He says in 1879, that he talks about here, was done. His dad was 36. He died when he was 38. He was alive when the painting was done. Says, it's just, whatever. Lucian Foster. Anyway, my first reaction when I opened my 1860s cartridge receipt, I was disappointed. I didn't want it. I'd already done a bunch of research. I think I did nothing for a few days, which is kind of like, crap, it's not him, it's not a daguerreotype. Cartridge receipts didn't come out to the 1860s. Not a saltwater. This is before I contacted a church historian that said the same thing I had been thinking, but I already figured it out. He didn't care. Anyway, not it's a cartridge receipt and not a saltwater print. Oh yeah, because I'd researched before it came in the mail. I researched saltwater prints, which did exist when Joseph Smith was alive. So paper photography did exist. It wasn't until 2020 I thought my picture was ever a daguerreotype, because everyone said he had daguerreotype taken in 1839. I don't know. I thought they knew what they were talking about. So I researched cartridge receipts. It's 10 years after Joseph Smith died that anything like this was patented. And then I had a strong impression to look up Emma Smith's photograph. And lo and behold, it's like the same paper. But, see this oval? Okay, this was taken in 1845. Believed by the current owner of this to be by Lucian Foster. This person who just knows everything about everything doesn't think that it could have been a different photographer. And so it's basically the same cardstock. You got this gold trim. It's very 1860s. I've looked at 1870s. You can do it yourself. 1880s. This is just, it's an 1860s style. And so around that time, I think the children of Joseph and Emma are finding out about this. Obviously, Julia Murdoch Smith, this ended up in her photo album. So I think she had it copied. So she borrowed it from Emma in the 1860s and living under the abusive husband, sadly, in Missouri. And so this does say, this paper was printed in 1860s, but the original image, 1845. So I was like, oh, it can be copied. Suddenly I was okay. I wasn't depressed. It just took me a few days and like, just look at this. It could be copied. My mom had said that. I was already, like, oh no, I spent $250 on this. This could prove it like that, These little things were scary, okay? It was really to invest all that time I'd spent. Time is money. Spent a lot of time in summer 2017. October is when I bought it. Look at that background. This is what Colin Weaver and I talked about. Again, I can't quote him and I can't use this in a paper or anything, but just a professional, I'll say. I looked at this. Just the fact that the distance between her head she's shorter than Joseph. She's like 5'9". What did I find out? I think I wrote it all down. 5'9", so what someone said. And then people often said he was 6'2". 6'2", 5'9". This background clearly is draped. You can see the waves in it, and they did do that. They would do that, get a rod, but I don't know. Maybe he just couldn't get it. Maybe he cut it himself and just didn't cut the one board the same length, my theory, and then draped it over, and that was just his. Maybe Joseph just donated some wood, and he wasn't a carpenter, he was a photographer, and just didn't get a perfectly level background. So it slants right there, it slants right there. The lighting is from opposite sides, but this professional I was talking to, he was just sort of like, well, you could just move that around, and maybe he was outside for this one, maybe he was I don't think he had his own studio when he did this photo. I think that is evidence of that. Lighting's coming from a different side is the only difference. But again, hers is a daguerreotype. I think mine's in the right perspective, but it doesn't matter. I think he moved his studio around. Anyway, it looks like a good several inches. So you're looking at 5-inch difference between them. But then again, as a photographer, I did learn that women's torsos are longer. Don't know. But yeah, the backgrounds. And it definitely looks probably about the same shade. And when you look it up close, they both look like there's a texture, sort of like a speckled texture. So as I was stating, it's courtesy of the collection of John Hasseljack, and Mormonism.com, you can go there, but he owns a lot of stuff, and he's been studying all this for over 20, 30 years, and he told me in an email he thinks it is Lucian Foster, because that's just sort of what we assume of that time period, because they don't really talk about another. It was like 20,000 people in their county, Nauvoo, So anyway, on the back of it, you see Rick Grunder's website. This was created before John Hasseljack owned it. We can scroll down here, and we can go. So this is a person that sold this for several $1,000s to John. Sorry, I probably butchered his name. But here you go. So I'm looking at here at RF St. Louis, Missouri. It's Julia Murdoch Smith's photo album. She was living there, 1860s, by 1879 or whatever. She left her abusive husband, and he just had a lot of problems, and she went back to Nauvoo, though. But before then, she apparently got a hold of Emma Smith's daguerreotype. I have analyzed this extensively, but I'm just going to... St. Louis, Missouri, that lines up. She got her daguerreotype. That's where she got someone to print it. They just copy daguerreotypes a lot. She lived in Missouri, blah, 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 blah. The oval shape, as I talk about, I've just looked at the daguerreotype, which I'm not going to put on my website, whatever. But, if you want to study it yourself, maybe you can find a copy of it. I don't know, whatever. It's exactly the same. But they took it out. Does that make sense? The glass protected it from oxidizing and turning black. And then the metal, there'd be a nice decorative metal on on her daguerreotype going around here. So this is covered in the daguerreotype. So they took it out of the case. That's why it's black now. It's just as black as that what I showed you up there, but I'm not showing you her daguerreotype. You can just go Community Christ if they ever open up again. I went to visit, and I was hoping I could see their collection, but they were closed. Several $1,000. I spent a lot of money to go there and look at just to look. I've been bugging them, but I thought it'd be cool to walk through their museum, and they were not open. And I looked at their website and really thought they would be, but they were not. And it's probably for the best. It's fine. I had a really good time visiting Missouri not that long ago. But, I don't have any animosity towards the Reorganized Church of Christ Latter-day Saints. don't agree with him, but that's fine. I don't think Joseph Smith III was a liar, though, you know? Does that mean you agree? I think he was right about everything he said, or you can be wrong about things and not be a liar. Does that make sense? You can forget your right and lefts. We talked about up there. I think he just was getting older and like, oh no, I think it was his. I think he was just confused. He was going blind at the time, you guys. Anyway, not talking about that. I'm talking about the Amboy, 1860, sort of going to my theories here. And so this is just sort of the story, just so that you understand, you know, he'd already promised his first wife. He's been married 3 times before he dies, but he was a widower twice. But he promised the first wife he would never become a polygamist, so that sort of cemented his stance, because everyone was so, polygamy is evil, but then there's so many people in the background living spiritual wifery and prostituting, and that wasn't as condemned as much as plural marriage. But anyway, but just that's how he grew up. Everyone saying his dad was polygamous, and that it made him bad, and it just was a sensitive issue of how he grew up. And he made a promise. You know, so he says in a promise to his wife's family he would never do that. So, and he would never support it, and that's how he got her hand in marriage, basically. So, you know, by the time he's visiting Utah, wasn't in the best terms with people. And so I'm explaining that as I talk about autumn leaves here. Just not the most harmonious conversation here. But you can read through that. I don't think that went to the right page, so I think I need to change that link. Yeah, that's not right. Glad I'm making this video. I will be editing this. But in the autumn leaves, he gets into an argument with Brigham Young, and Brigham Young accuses Emma of holding onto pictures and not sharing them with the church, which in other parts of this article, they do say picture. You know, this is just different things I've found. I think I found this in 2017, actually, before I owned it. I was like, oh, they talk about pictures, Alexander. But they did use the word picture in reference to a camera. I think portrait, you know, we're talking about Carter. And that's where I think they do know that was a painting. But I think Brigham Young knew about a real photograph. That's just my theory there. And I'm going to go ahead and change that on my website. It's really good. I go through this and double check my clicks here. Websites and things. So, but yeah, they assume it was Lucian Foster. And so you can see here, this is a screenshot on my website. I do have the Nauvoo Neighbor. So here's the advertisement. And then things were just really bad in 1844. They weren't really... Things kind of stayed stagnant until they left. So someone else becoming a photographer, people being able to afford to bring another... Like, financially things were kind of okay, but after Joseph Smith died and just all the persecution, there's just... Yeah, so I think it was actually the last page. You have to scroll all the way through to the advertisements and look for an L. There you go. Trying to zoom in. I think I just have to zoom in. There you go. Here's Lucian Foster. You know, he's most beautiful style. So this is August 1844, but he's been there since April. And so he may not have had his studio. I think when he took Joseph Smith's daguerreotype photo. And they're just explaining, you know, but he has specimens. We're talking about daguerre, you know, perfectly to the life of nature. So again, when they talk about Carter, they're saying they're trying to get it true to nature. That's just a big indication. They know that's Carter just doesn't have a photo of the man. Specimens, you know, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, there you go. Specimens may be seen in the rooms in the Nauvoo mansion where Emma Smith lives. There's already daguerreotypes in her house by August 1884. This is August 10th. But this newspaper is August 21st. Yeah, this is later, but there's not evidence that he didn't have his camera couldn't photograph the man that he's on the presidential campaign for. And so I talk a little bit more here about Lucian Foster. But yeah, if you look at him at the Joseph Smith papers, you'll see, I need to have that link in here, so I'll be editing my website somewhere. But yeah, to his biography that he was on his presidential campaign. And then they give all their sources there. So that's where we're going to stop here, and then we'll talk about 1840s clothing. This is, that was the first thing I did when I first bought it, so that'll be the next video. But all of that was about everything we know about Lucian Foster, which is not much. I mean, I'll just kind of end it with he didn't go to Utah. And that's that. That's why it's, but according to all these people that kind of know everything, that have studied more than me, they believe Emma's picture that has a similar background to mine, similar style. I believe it was Lucian Foster, and Joseph Smith III thinks his dad had his daguerreotype taken by Lucian Foster. We know that.